Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is spent answering just general questions, any questions that you have around media or virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about lower thirds. We're getting ready for doing a lot of lower thirds for the new Office Hours 2.0, and so we're thinking about it. So on Wednesdays, most Wednesdays of this month, we're going to be talking about different elements of graphics that we may be using, and kind of brainstorming and talking about what we like and don't like about ones that other people do. And then we'll talk about what's important in those pieces. So that's what we're going to be working on. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill, what do we got?
First one comes to us from James in Dublin, Ireland. And James says, I just purchased an ATEM device. When I connect an Ethernet cable, it does not appear to self-assign an IP address using DHCP. Why is this? How can I get it connected to my network? Entering the subnet, gateway, and IP details manually failed.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
First thing I do is get a small switch and just connect directly to your computer, and you can test whether or not your actual ports are all good with just a simple switch, 2 cables, and away you go. From there, I'd plug the switch into the network and then check that you go ahead and get a address from the network.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, great suggestion from Roscoe. And also, if ever, just in case you're using a managed switch, just make sure that the port that the ATEM is plugged into isn't assigned to a separate VLAN than your computer.
Jeffrey?
And it never hurts to do a full cycle of your whole system and get that going. Actually, I think I have to do that myself today sometime.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, maybe he's already done this, but just to make sure you go into the ATEM setup and make sure that it's set to DHCP, and to make sure the gateway is set correctly for your router, and that the primary and secondary DNS are set correctly.
Absolutely. Next question.
Next one coming up from Paul Terpstra in Janesville, Ohio, I believe. And he says, what color clothing works best? I'm using a blue background. Dark blue seems to turn black, and medium blue seems to blend into the background.
Go ahead, Charles.
I'm always a fan of black, but you just have to make sure that it's a neutral black, so that there is no tint or color in your blacks or in your whites. And that's just from being on sets. You don't want to be wearing colorful clothing. So that would be my approach. But if you balance out your camera, then a black should look like black instead of anything else.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
I was going to make an assumption that you're using Zoom possibly, and we do know that Zoom is crushing the blacks, and therefore you may be having a little bigger issue there, but exactly what Charles said otherwise.
And go ahead, Stuart.
Yep, simple rule. Look for something that's on the opposite side of the color wheel to what your background is. That way you're using contrasting colors and it will stand out from the background, and you can use as flat a background as you want to concentrate the data on the foreground where you need it.
Go ahead, Bill.
It's changing a little bit, I think, from my early days. When I was starting out in broadcast, everything was interlaced, and there was all sorts of things that conflicted. And you were told, do not wear solid white, solid black, do not wear tight stripes or houndstooth check or all sorts of patterns. There was a lot of technical reasons why you would get crawling or moire on those tight patterns. Full black or full white used to be that the cameras didn't have a lot of range of contrast in them, and that meant that if the person on the camera had dark skin tones and you put a white background or a lot of white around them, or if they were in a white shirt, it would be hard for the camera to split that exposure correctly. Now, I will say that it has gotten much, 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 much better. To me, the only thing that's still difficult, and the reason I follow those rules, no white, no black, no tight patterns, is that every camera path between what the camera's seeing and delivery to somebody's eyeballs, there are now so many of them, non-interlaced, direct, progressive for a lot of the computer stuff. There's still some broadcast out there doing interlace. That following those old rules still keeps me feeling safe regardless of the medium I'm going out on.
Yeah, when people ask us, I have to answer this question about once a week. When people ask us this, I say no blacks, no whites, no reds. Those are things that, those are things that make it harder for us to do what we do. Desaturated colors that are not skin that don't compete with the skin is usually what I want. So that way, it also allows me to color correct their skin without having to worry about the rest of the frame. So I can sit there and just get their face to look right, and the other parts don't really matter as much, you know. So those are the things that we look at. No tight patterns, no stripes. So those are, as a real short pattern of that stuff. And blue, I would only do desaturated blue or a light blue behind me, as opposed to anything. I don't like the background to be more saturated than I am. So that tends to be more, another thing that we tend to lean towards as we start to build those. Next question.
Moving on, the next question comes from Chris Fenwick here on the panel from California. And Chris says, do you think it's disrespectful that Jeff Bezos requested William Shatner wear a red shirt for today's?
I think it was great. Go ahead, Stuart.
Original series, next gen, DS9 or Voyager, which series? Because the red shirts get transferred to different departments. They're engineering.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's always the red shirt. The red shirt's always the first one to die. They even used it in the next Star Wars movie with J.J. Abrams. They were like the red shirt. And you're like, is it really gonna? And they killed him. They literally killed him as they jumped.
In original series are the security officers.
I know.
They're the ones boldly sent in front of the Klingons.
The worst part is that they made him ride in the middle seat out to the rocket. Like, they couldn't have even given him shotgun. This is disrespectful, and I don't think Jeff Bezos really likes Bill Shatner. It's awful.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to comment, if there was one person out there who doesn't understand the red shirt Star Trek thing. I mean, there's some people who have never watched the show, I'm sure. And that when they beamed down to the surface of a potentially hostile planet, it was always the red shirt to go first. Whoever's wearing a red shirt was going to get killed.
It was just, I thought that was great. Anyway, next question.
Next one, Guy Cochran's up next, and he's in Seattle and asking Zoom Room 5.8. Oh, he's here on the panel today too. Good. Zoom Room 5.8 public beta opinion now offers multi-camera mode. One machine could bring in 3 cameras as separate participants. Any ideas on how we can use this in production?
Guy, do you want to explain that a little bit? Or do you know?
Sure. So there's a new feature, and if we go into the back end, we can see that there's a new option to allow multi-camera mode. So you have your original camera, which is in this instance, my live streaming video device.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to add in 2 more cameras, which is my MITK NDI video and my integrated web camera. And so now if I make a new meeting and I invite this Zoom room, what happens is we get, it's coming online here just a second. It's inviting. I can see it coming. And now it's in the waiting room. So the Zoom room is now in the waiting room. I admit it. And now what comes in is 3 separate participants. So you'll see now that we have the scope box. We have this one here and the NDI. And so there's 3 separate. So I'm envisioning dropping, let's say, for instance, 3 witness cams on a set or at a sporting event. And now we have 3 separate PTZ cameras that we can just request camera control, request camera control, request camera control. We could have 3 from one laptop, so we get 3 angles.
And is it pushing all that data out for 3 individual feeds?
That's what it is. I don't know if it's doing full 1080. That I still need to test and see what's pulling, because if it's sending that, then now you got like 6, 6, 6. So you got 18 megs going out.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Mickey?
Yeah, my thought on this is with some workflows wherein people are bringing in contributors via Zoom, the return video could be 3 separate feeds instead of trying to cram everything into one single feed, one single 1080 feed. So you can have like the video of the other contributors come in on one feed, teleprompter on another feed, and so on and so forth.
Right. I think it's welcome. I think we have to figure out what the bandwidth requirements are. Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, I was also wondering whether it would provide those 3 1080 feeds at 1080, but I also wonder in a meeting how other participants or other rooms would decide which one of those 3 speakers is active speaker. Is it going to identify that based on what? I just wonder about that.
Yeah, it would identify it as by audio. It's meant to be in a conference room, and there are certain cameras like Logitech Rally cameras that can identify who's talking, and it'll light that person up. So I still got to play with it, but so far there's only 2 certified cameras. One's by Logitech and one I think is by Hudley. So there's still a lot of digging to do. This was just released just the other day. So digging around, I found it and was like, hey, We
Yeah,
could
it's
use
really
it for our meetings with scope box, meters. So we could have a waveform that comes in, a histogram that comes in, and then a LUTS meter all in one shot. So I hit one button, invite, and boom, all my tools are there. So pretty cool.
Really, really interesting. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that if we can get full quality or something that remotely resembles full quality, even 720, it could be a really interesting way to send those kits out, like some of the stuff we've done with cooking, where you can have a couple different, views of stuff to make that work. Really, really interesting. Yeah, we'll have to do some more research. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next, and Douglas says, what brand or model of Windows laptop with RTX graphics would you recommend that would be the closest to a MacBook Pro in design and build? And he parenthetically says, I've heard Razer Blade laptops have issues with battery bloating due to poor battery management.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, you'll get battery bloating on any lithium polymer battery rather than lithium ion. The chemicals are the same inside, but one's in a hard metal case rather than the plastic case. And the plastic cases bloat, such as drone batteries. Now, the question itself is actually slightly wrong, Douglas, because you've asked about which RTX graphics. Now, RTX is great if you're doing 3D rendering, if you're doing rendering for animations, and a whole heap of things. But if you're doing streaming, you actually want a Quadro graphics GPU because they can do unlimited NVENC encodes. So you can do multiple streams being converted to the MPEG-4 streams in the GPU at the same time. The RTX graphics are limited in the number. A lot of the time it's to a maximum of 3 encodes at any one time. So that limits your options if you're streaming. But the general rule of safe brands to choose for Windows laptops are HP, Dell, and Lenovo. My personal preference is for the Lenovo, but again, Quadro rather than RTX.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and there's other factors involved, like for instance, if you're talking about Core i5 or Core i7, Core i9, the Ryzen equivalents to that, and running the RTX graphics from there. I even have a gateway on my right side here that does a pretty decent job with RTX graphics as on the whole design and everything like that. There's almost no laptops that are going to be close to MacBook because they just don't want to deal with any type of legal issue because they look way too close to a MacBook Pro. Lenovo is a great one. Of course, we have the Asus. They've got their game Republic of Gamers laptops that are doing really good, and of course you can get those in NVIDIA and RTX formats, and a lot of others. But I would look more on the form function because in all reality, a MacBook Pro keyboard, I've never been a fan of that, and of course you can get touchscreens on Windows machines, which can really help.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm using the Razer Blade 15 right now. It's last year's model, no problem with battery bloating. I've got it right next to my MacBook Pro 16, and the build quality is super, super nice. I mean, nowadays, this has a 2070 in it with the 8 gigs of video RAM. It's pretty inexpensive for what it does. I upgraded the RAM in it. Pretty easy to do. The newer one does have the choice of 3060, 3070, or 3080 cards, but you're getting up into the $3,300 range because I've been researching these as well. I'd highly recommend them over any other brand. I've had no problems except for dust buildup, and then I just take it apart and blow it out. And that's been the only issue is overheating due to dust buildup, but I'd say go with the Razer Blade.
I had a Razer that I'm afraid that it just one day it just stopped turning on. It was out of service. It's like it literally just never turned on again, and it was out of service, and it was just kind of became a brick. And I think that was the last one I bought. But we used a bunch of them. They do work well when they work. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next. He's come back with, would there be any graphical editing software to create graphics for SPX-GC to play out?
If only we had someone that knew something about SPX-GC. Oh, wait. Tuomo.
I might know something about it.
Go ahead, Tuomo.
I happen to be the developer of it. So
yeah.
So there are some, because SPX basically operates HTML graphics. So any application which can output HTML files as graphic design documents can be used with SPX.
And what specific applications would those be?
There is one which is in beta phase at the moment called Loopik.io. It was announced just a few weeks back, and it's in beta. It's a web app. So it's basically just like any other animation user interface. So you can drag elements onto it. There's a timeline, you can animate those, and it exports out an HTML document with all the animations embedded into it. With a little bit of tweaking, you can use those in SPX. So that's.
What do you mean by a little bit of tweaking?
A little bit of tweaking means that you have to introduce a little bit of code between the graphic and the user interface of SPX to allow the operator to enter content into the template.
Ah, got it. And what was
because it's outputting just an animation, HTML animation, so you will need to tie that into SPX user interface.
And what's the name of that software again?
Loopik.io.
Loopik.io. Okay, great.
Loopik.io. There are other ones coming up in web space. One of them is Rive, RIVE.app. This is a very, very, very modern animation tool, and it is going to output. It is not a typical HTML file, but it is something which can run in a browser. So in the future, there's going to be a ton of options, I'm sure, to be able to use as an authoring environment to do HTML graphics, but there's no standard of doing that yet.
Yeah, it looks like Loopik is the one that is the most developed at the moment. I mean, would you say that's the case?
That's the closest one I can think of.
Right, absolutely. Go ahead, George.
So Douglas, as Timo mentioned, there's really no app, but I'm in my playing with using it over the past couple of days. It's definitely some functionality in the HTML and the CSS that you can use to change the graphics. And Alex, with your permission, later on in the second hour, hopefully I can show a snippet of that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that'd be great. Roscoe?
Yeah, I looked in the store real quick. There's a Google Slides, it looks like, translator to SPX-GC. So I did put the link in for the store.
That's great. Next question.
Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina is up next. And Bo says, yesterday, Alex mentioned that the 5G service in his area has actually made his cell service worse. Ouch. I've noticed this as well, in some cases making my phone's data connection nearly unusable. What gives?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, the wavelength is shorter for 5G compared to 4G. Just like sound, as you go up in wavelength, for radio waves, you get more and more directional. So you really need line of sight. If you've got a metal signpost, like a stop sign between your phone and the nearest cell tower, that stop sign will actually reflect more of the signal back, and you'll drop back to 4G or 3G, depending on what's available in the area. It's simple physics that does it.
It's a horrible idea. I'm just going to say 5G was a horrible idea. Like it was done by people it was written by people who live in the city. Like, who can have, something every 100 feet and it's not a big deal. There's stoplights and there's things and they can put it on all these things. But anybody outside of a dense population is never going to see it, but they've spent all this money on it. And as they change their transceivers, I'm just seeing all kinds of breakup, with just 4G. LTE, because they're changing what they're using and how the phones are interacting with it. And it's gotten to the point now, sometimes I think it's all a big plan to just push us to Wi-Fi, because I just look for Wi-Fi so I can make phone calls. So anyway, it doesn't hurt me that much because I'm at home a lot, but it makes it harder for me to call everybody because some people are still using a cell network. So, but 5G is probably, they're going to try to hide it, but I think it's probably one of the largest boondoggles that we've had in the telecommunications industry. It was just an incredibly stupid idea. Next question.
Comes from Tony Nachampatak, who is in Dallas, Texas, and he asks, what's the best way to power the Blackmagic 6K Pro looking to last 6 to 7 hours on batteries?
Go ahead, Charles.
Okay, so this is what I've done with my 6K Pro, and this is a rig that I had to build in the middle of the pandemic. I think I've shown this before. What I've started to use was it's a shark fin hot swappable battery V-mount in the back. And if you see here in the back, I have two of the Core SWX. I think I believe they are the hyper cores. And I've been able to do about 6 to 7 hours with these. But the best thing about it is that they are hot swappable. So you don't have to shoot or stop and switch anything. You just keep the camera on and actually just go and switch the batteries as you need. Has about 4 D taps, so you could power. I've had up to 3 monitors, one for scopes, one for values, one for everything else. Yeah, so I would try this. This has been the most stable that I've had, and I've never had it crash on me or fault once. So I would suggest that.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I was going to mention that as well. The hot swap battery plates, though, I would, if you are starting your kit now, I would go with the Anton Bauer system as opposed to gold band system, as opposed to VLOC, because it's a more secure connection. But on top of that, you could also get these battery packs from companies like Anton Bauer and IDX, and even RE sells them, that are 400 to 900 watt hours. So there are even some that go up to 1400 watt hours, and those will last you the entire day.
Yeah, go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, I was going to mention the Core XWX product as well. As a matter of fact, right now, for the Blackmagic camera, it's like $100 off over at the DVE store. So I don't think one of those will get you 6 hours, but it's certainly a great solution just for general shooting.
Go ahead, Bill.
Another option is there's all sorts of little smaller battery mounting plates on top. Tilta makes one that I have for my Blackmagic 6K, and it has not only a power output to run the camera, but it also has an input so that you can take external batteries and feed it through this, and that'll convert it to the right voltage to get into your camera. So it's another option if you don't want to put a lot of heavy stuff on your camera, if you're not doing a full rig.
Yeah, I already have a V-mount because of the other Ursa cameras that I have that came with them, and so DTAP to 6K is what I use, and it lasts. I don't know how long it lasts. It lasts as long as I've shot with it, so it's a big battery, and I haven't had to do it long enough to run out of battery. So I've got a couple of those. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, what tools do you prefer for color correction during the editing process?
Go ahead, Charles.
The one thing, whether it's pre-production, post-production, live production, your scopes. You got to be staring at your scopes just to make sure that you are within the range that you're working for. Outside of that, it really depends on what your creative vision is.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. So inside most of the NLEs, there are basic color tools. Now, you're not going to do work the level of Charles, who's a professional colorist, but I always do a base grade pass, and most of these NLEs have gotten competent color tools for at least doing a base grade, so you can work with things. That plus a LUT will get most people at their skill level most of the way toward a viewable for a rough cut and things like that. So I'm constantly in the Final Cut color tools just to do that much. I don't pretend to be a great colorist, but I can get a lot of stuff done there.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, you might want to also check out Nobe Omniscope. They just dropped a new release that does some pretty powerful stuff. If you're using something besides Resolve, you might want some fancier scopes. And so I'll put a link in the chat to this new Nobe Omniscope that just dropped.
I reached out to them. We'll see if we can get them to come into office hours for a second hour. But as an aside, I think it's Time to Pixels is the name of the company, they put out a bunch of, I guess over the last couple of months, I just missed it. They've been putting out videos on how scopes work within, obviously within their platform. I think it's a great way to promote your product is just to pure information. The first one's a little bit about them, but the rest of them are really digging into how to use scopes in a production environment, and happens to be inside their product. And it's just a great example of, you want to look at how people should do YouTube videos in the sense that, don't sit there and try to talk about your product. Just use your product to show how to understand something, how to learn something. Now, they haven't gotten a lot of views, and we should all go and check it out to make sure that they're encouraged, because it's really good. The person I think he's out of Poland, who wrote the scopes, is kind of walking you through how to use them and what they mean and all the little bits and pieces and everything else. It's really worth checking out. Next question.
Next one comes from Michael Drusty here on the panel from Peoria, Illinois, and he asks, how many on the panel will purchase the new MacBook Pro?
Go ahead, Charles.
Yes. No. I'm actually reaching out to the business Apple team because I'm trying to figure out which way would be faster to get the product. In the past, when I ordered through them, it just takes me longer. So now I just order through the app. But yeah, I've been waiting for this because I'm in the middle of whether I'm going to build a PC tower, get a Mac Pro tower, and just get that souped up, or get this and see where it gets me. Now that we're starting to come out of the pandemic, I might be going back to the studio and having clients coming through the space. So,
Jeffrey?
Since I don't need the high res video, I'm kind of debating whether, because I have the 2017 MacBook Pro, I'm going to be doing the trade-in for that, but I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to go with the new MacBook Pro or if the Mac Mini does the update, because you can get a lot of these monitors now. Like for instance, I have the ViewSonic right in front of me, which is a touch screen portable monitor, and then I can use my own keyboards and mice, and also remote into the machine, and that'll cost a lot less than having the MacBook Pro, from what I understand. But the only other thing is that becomes an all-in-one system. So when I'm traveling, it's a nice thing to have. So I'm pretty close to the MacBook side, but we'll see what happens.
Go ahead, George.
I am a big fan of MacBook Pros, but these Mac Minis are so good. I'll wait and see what update comes for those, but for the most part, I'm probably going to get a 16 in the near future.
Yeah, Bill?
Yeah, so I'm tempted, and I shouldn't be, because my plan has always been I buy like every other or every third cycle. That seems to me to be usually the thing. And I bought a 16-inch MacBook Pro just barely a year ago. The question is going to be, what does it actually do in performance? We're all expecting something kind of miraculous, I think, because the M1 series has been so far, it has outstripped everybody's expectations. They really did something pretty special there. So now the question is, will the M1X do a small increment, a medium increment, or if it's an increment that large that we got from going to the old Intel chips to the M1, if you get a doubling of that again, it's going to be a no-brainer. Everybody who does serious work is going to want that machine.
I think the thing for me, I'm looking for the Mac Mini. I think COVID has changed my whole personal process enough that I barely open my laptop. If I go out, I take an iPad, but I do all of my work because I've got a bunch of machines here, and I don't really want to use my laptop ever. Like if I don't have to, so I just don't go out enough to need it. I think that's what's happened for me. So I'm less interested in the MacBook, I'm much more interested in the Mini. Chris, how much further before the launch? Where are we at?
They are on a hold for the last 12 minutes. They're at T minus 15 with a 12-minute hold. We're okay.
Okay, great. All right, let's jump to the next question.
Moving on, this one comes from our friend Hasmuk in Cape Town, South Africa. Charles, thank you for the LUTs, he starts with. Explain how the sample clip should be recorded for creating a LUT. What about camera white balance, iris, and shutter speed settings? Temperature of the light. Should all these be set exactly for the LUTs to be effective?
Go ahead, Charles.
So my approach is that you need to get all those settings from your creative intent. Like the LUT is not going to fix everything. The LUT is a fine-tuning tool to get you from one place to another that you might not be able to get to in camera. But all of those things, it should be the creative intent of the DP or whoever it is that is shooting, and then use the LUT to balance out some things that you might not be able to just because of restrictions, lights, flags, whatever it is. Yeah, so I would start there and know what is your final output. If you're going to be in 709, then maybe shooting inside of video might be a better approach for you because it's going to be less work. Now, if you know that you're going to be doing some post-production, well, it might be better if you shoot in log, because now you have some leverage and a wider space to play with once you're in post, right? So it depends what your turnaround time is. If you have a large team, if it's just you, like your knowledge base, you need to figure all those things out, but get your creative intent and get as much as you can in camera. Balance things out, set design, light for the subject, warmer on the talent, maybe cooler in the background to get that color separation. And then you go from there. And the LUT is just a fine-tuning tool, but know what the process is that you're trying to get to. Yeah, so we can keep going. But
go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the assumption is that you can redo the lighting identically to what you did when you did your test. And so therefore make sure that the lights are computer controlled. You do, and I always want the card where the face is going to be, because I want to correct for the face and make the flesh look the best. If the background is slightly bluish or greenish, the audience usually won't notice to the point. at all. So it's always to me about flesh tones, and obviously you want to be in the exact lighting environment from which, when you do your test and make your LUT to your final production.
Next question.
Hazma Kajar is back immediately, and he said he was told by a semi-pro that my 6Ks are overkill for webcams in a Zoom meeting webinar. What do I need to be aware of to set these cameras optimally to counter my dear friend's opinion? And can I also sleep better?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I have to agree that for meetings, the 6Ks are come on, they're overkill. But for a webinar wherein you have an audience, you want to be broadcasting at the highest quality that you can afford to. So I don't think it's overkill for that. And to make it so that you don't feel bad about using 6Ks for a meeting, 1080p Ikegami broadcast cameras start at 20,000 US. So
go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, the reason, Hazmak, that you were told off by a semi-pro and not a full pro is because they're wrong. As Mickey has just said, you always want the best quality camera for the purpose that you can afford, that you can realistically use, and the 6Ks are a great choice. I would suggest that to really make a point, you need to upgrade to either some rehoused L-series glass by GL Optics, or maybe some Cook primes, or maybe even an Ingenue zoom for the cameras.
Yeah, I think the Ingenue would be great. Bill?
Exactly that. You know, those of us who do this for a living often have spent a lot of time learning, like, what are the characteristics of lenses? So I haven't seen yet a webcam which do a fine job of one job, that you can pick a lens depending on the circumstances that you're in. You know, I know my camera's going to be this far from me. I want this much depth of field. I want this aperture. I can do that with bespoke lenses. I cannot do that with a webcam, no matter how nice the webcam is.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Just in relation to Zoom, many people haven't seen the results that can be achieved through Zoom, particularly at 1080. So sometimes their expectations are lower, but if they actually see the results, then sometimes you get a change of opinion. And in a conversation like that, just out of a sort of matter of interest, I'd ask them, well, what do you recommend?
I'd like to quote the great philosopher Ferris Bueller. It says, first of all, you can never go too far, right? So go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I second what everybody just said, but also you have to know what your pipeline is. And what I mean by that is your camera attached to anything else? And a lot of us here have other Blackmagic equipment that is controlling the camera. So you have to keep that in mind. If you're just attaching the camera to your computer, yeah, it's probably overkill. But if you're working with certain types of lenses and you have an ATEM Pro and you're trying to shade the camera from the software, then you start to realize the benefits of what a 6K Pro from Blackmagic and all the accoutrement that comes along with it can get you. But it all depends on what you're trying to get to and your pipeline.
Yeah. You know, I have to admit that I built a business around doing overkill. Like that's my entire mode of operation. So when I look at it, you know, when I started doing 1080p podcasts in 2005, people thought I was crazy, and I was. It took me 2 months to get the first one done. Like the first one, to get it out the door, like it was too powerful. I mean, too much data for my computers to process, you know, the green screen and everything else. But then I went on to make, you know, a lot of money doing work for Adobe, Salesforce. I paid off the camera that I bought at by the way, not $2,000, but $82,000 cost me for that camera, and lens and everything else. And I paid it off in a year, you know, of work. I mean, of just the rentals, not the work that I got from it, which was hundreds of thousands of dollars, because I was the only one in Northern California with a 444 camera. So, so, you know, playing that way out there, you know, gives you, and now the fact that you can do it for a couple $1,000s per camera is crazy, you know, like, you know, and I think that it really provides an incredible opportunity. And we have to remember that people watch that short depth of field all the time, and they're used to it. You know, my kids will immediately identify what's news and what's not news, like what's old broadcast and what they call, you know, the stuff that we watch or whatever. Like they don't have any, and they immediately know it. And part of it, why I asked, one of the reasons, and they were like, "Oh, the background's softer," on the YouTube stuff that they watch, And so the thing is they don't know what that means, but they know that when they see that background sharp, they immediately think that it's old media versus YouTubers who have razor sharp depth of field, and so people unconsciously, whether they consciously know it or not, they unconsciously connect that short depth of field with quality and modernity. And so that's why we don't use, I don't even use 2/3 inch chips on any show unless I'm forced to. Like if we have to use a truck that uses it, I'll get backed into a 2/3 inch chip, but everything's super 35 or bigger, for everything that I do, unless I have a throw longer than 75 feet or I'm backed into a corner. Next question.
T-minus 12 and counting, just so you
Copy
know.
that.
Excellent. Laura Seal in Greensboro, our friend, says strategies for flying with batteries for production given the restrictions. Seems like the limit is 2 spare lithiums, and that's just not enough for her.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, this really varies from airline to airline, but most airlines give a bit more leeway to media personnel. And if you flash a media badge, doesn't matter where you got it.
How do we make a media? How do we get a media badge? All right, we print them. So you can print your own media badge. Go ahead, Bill.
As long as each battery pack doesn't go over 100 watt hours, and that all the contacts are properly sealed. If you talk to them about being a media personnel, then you should be good.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
So there's another strategy, which is rental houses. If you have adapters, and this is why you should always carry adapters for things like the Anton Bauer and the V mounts and things like that will operate your equipment from them, because rental houses always have those available. It's also equally good. Spend some time on the Usenet groups and the rest of the places on just any sites where fellow video people, I know Chris is laughing at me because I brought up Usenet news groups. It's like throwback. Anyway, the people that often on those boards, if you meet them in other cities, sometimes they use the same equipment you do. And I've flown into towns and I've said I need 5 V-mount batteries, and a friend of mine from that town will show up with them and have a cup of coffee with me. So connections make friendships.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, they've covered most everything. Fly with a friend and have them put 2 more batteries.
Yeah, exactly.
Carry on, because they can do it.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So if depending on how much time you have before the event, doing FedEx ground is always a good thing. Rental houses like Bill was talking about, or just simply order it and then have it shipped to the hotel, because the hotel will. Some hotels will do like a 24-hour hold, so you'll want to make sure that it gets there a day before you arrive, but you definitely want to talk to the hotel and let them see if they'll allow to hold the package, so when you get there you can grab it and use it from there.
Next question.
Moving on, Wilson Martinez in Charlotte, North Carolina says, good morning, Alex. Shared with you the video of Cuba Gooding Jr. acceptance speech. Can you talk about what's going on with the director's head? Camera cuts, giving extra time for thank yous, and so forth.
Wilson had posted this on Twitter. Of course, I don't have the link now here because it's not in the I always tell people not to put the link in the questions. Oh, here it is. There we go. So guys got it. So this is... So he's talking about what, and we should, one of the things I've been trying to do is get some of the TDs that we work with to come on and just have a general roundtable discussion about it. But and it's so funny, TDs, you see the snapping that he's doing. So there are some technical directors. So he's the director, and then there's the technical director, and that's actually cutting the show. And some technical directors like that snapping thing because that's what he wants to cut, and some hate it. Hate it. They hate the snapping thing. But I see a lot of TDs that are used to working in broadcast or larger broadcast. The snapping is the cut. Like that's when he wants, because it's hard to say. You're saying go camera 3, but when in that moment should you cut? Like that's it's a camera 3 is a wide thing for a TD. Going like this is that's when I want you to do it. And so. So that's why he's doing the snapping, is he's saying, I want you to do it right then. And I've watched Nate actually do that, snap out we were at a concert a couple weeks ago working on it. And so then when the TD's doing it, that's there. I mean, in the end, we don't have Sky here today, but in the end, you're trying to tell a story. You're trying to tell the audience what they're what's happening and give them a feel for being there. And so what they're looking for is, how do I want to tell a wide story. This is where it's at, and this is the excitement, and these are the people that are excited for him, and these are the people who lost, and these are the people, and you're threading this whole story of all the things that happened around that, and it's and doing it live is complex. because it's, you don't only get to do it once, and you have a whole bunch of people, and that's why like the staffing on those things has to be perfect, because those camera operators have to know what he needs before he needs it. They're handing him the shots that he wants, and he's not pulling against it. And that's the big difference between, a good TD can pull a good show or reasonably good show out of mediocre camera operators, but man, it feels like you've been dragged along the gravel when you're done, because you're asking them. You just keep telling them, okay, give me more nose room, give me more of this. I'll focus in a little bit more. You're telling them all these things, and it just slows the whole edit down. So it's never going to be as good as what it is when you have crack operators, able to know what you need before you need it. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Most TDs actually feel like they should be cutting the show, but the problem with directors that snap is they tend to put the fingers in front of the face of the TD, and that interrupts what the TD is visually seeing, and it just annoys them.
It's a funny thing. You were going to say something, Chris.
It's take, and then the discussion is, do you press the button on the T or the K? That's all you have to do. Take.
Yeah.
Nobody in broadcast says go camera 3. Also, I've cut hundreds of hours of stuff. You can snap in front of my face. You can punch me in the arm. It's just part of the job, in my opinion. I don't think it's that big a deal.
No, I've heard. I've heard camera operators, or TDs complain about it. They really hate it when folks do it. But anybody who's done a lot of it in a truck, there's always enough directors that do that. That's part of the culture that they get used to. So when someone complains about it, the TD, when they complain about that, I know that they haven't done any big shows.
They haven't done a lot of it. You can always say, hey, I'm going to go to lunch. And walk off.
Go ahead, Stuart.
When you say the snapping fingers, I'm going to point out it's a US thing only. Oh. If you did that in a truck in Australia, you would be asked, what the heck is wrong with you?
Well, and what's interesting about that is that it is a very common thing is that a lot of this stuff is US only, or European only, or Australian only. These cultures build up because a lot of those folks don't travel. And so the place that we see it all mixed together and where they kind of mix their ideas are places like the Olympics or whatever, because all these teams are coming in from all over the world, and then it kind of cross-pollinates between them, and they take what they like and leave what they don't, and everything else. But it only happens every couple of years where they all get to see each other, because for the most part, they're all working in local markets, or at least no bigger than national markets for the most part. Next question.
T-5.
Oh, Courtney, sorry.
I was just going to say the hand gesture and the snap, although it may be annoying, is a cue to the TD, especially if the TD sitting right next to the director, that's when the take's going to occur, so he's not confused with ready camera 3. 3, where are you going? Because that can be confusing with just verbal.
Yeah. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia, and here on the panel says, does anyone know of a focal reducer, commonly known as mislabeled as a speed booster, that will mount a medium format lens in front of a Canon EF mount?
I actually don't.
Anyone? I've got these lovely P67 Pentax 6.7 lenses, 165 f2.8. It would be beautiful in front of my cameras, but I'm wasting the image circle even on a full frame camera. I cannot find one that goes to EF, and EF adapts to everything.
I have. I don't know it. Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. Anyone else? Roscoe.
Yeah, I found one at B&H, but I think it's for a specific lens, and I'll also post the YouTube video that talked about it.
Next question.
Lenny Nelson, looks like in San Antonio, Texas, has been asked to record on the high school marching band. I'll use a drone for the video. Any recommendations for a portable audio recorder?
The only thing I'll say about a drone in a high school band is that putting a drone in a populated area is a big. It's a big deal. Like, like it's not something that the liability is pretty intense, and you have to make sure that you're following all the laws. If you're getting paid for it, you have to be licensed. So I know that that's not what you're asking. I'm answering a different question, but I can tell you that there's an enormous number of liabilities. What's the 3, Chris? Oh, 3 minutes. Yeah.
2 minutes.
Yeah. There's an enormous number of liabilities related to drones in the air when people are around. Different every country. But generally you can't put a drone over someone without a fair number of licensing in the United States. Go ahead. Bill and Courtney, real quick.
Yeah, 99.9% of the time I say don't put a mic on the camera, but this is the one time when I don't think that's fair, because a marching band, the visual field, you want to hear what's going on in that field. So if I was going to shoot a marching band looking for decent audio, I would put a mic on the camera, a shotgun style mic, and let them march past, because your sound field will change because it's a big group of players, but you will be listening mostly to what you're seeing. I think that fits for that.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, but don't put a mic on the drone, because then you'll just hear.
No, that's a bad idea.
And if you're going to use a drone, you should use a less than 250 gram drone. That way you avoid a lot of the restrictions.
Yeah, a lot of the restrictions go down.
It won't kill them. As far as a portable recorder, the Zoom H4 or the Zoom makes some good portable recorders with built-in mics that you could position around just on stands and let them go and record and get different perspectives.
Yeah. And one more question, then we're going to jump to the launch. Go ahead. Next question.
We're going to move through James Babbitt in San Diego's question. To make a slideshow with photos, text, and music, would you recommend iMovie, Final Cut Pro, or maybe the latest version of Keynote?
Bill?
Whatever you're most comfortable with. This is something where the tool you use, almost all of them will do a great job in the hands of a good operator. So if you're going to learn one and you want the simplest and quickest, I'd say it would be Keynote. And if you know Final Cut, you can perfectly do them in there.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
iPhoto has an amazing, slap it together. It does graphics, does animations. I've used it multiple times for multiple events. If you need to time it to music, then you need to see the audio waveform. So then you need an editor where you can actually time it up, seeing the audio waveform. But otherwise, I would just use iPhoto. I really don't know what Photos does.
Yeah, I would use Final Cut just because I have it and I want to be able to have a precise cut. I think that would be the thing. And I never really took to iMovie, the new one. It just always found frustrating. All right, here we go. Let's cut away. Oh, we got 30 seconds.
T30.
Yeah, guess what? You guys didn't press 2 times on the buffer. They're
You're
already flying.
You're behind.
All right. We're watching. Doesn't matter. Just keep going. Just go back to the coverage. Go. Oh, where'd he go?
Hold on, let me spot on you.
Okay.
Group experience.
Okay, you can't talk, or you have to spotlight it because it keeps on cutting away.
All right, keep spotlighting it.
Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Command engine start. 2, 1.
What a launch. We are on our way to Max-Q, the first milestone here on its flight to space.
May the force be with you, Mr. Kirk.
You can follow along, obviously, with the altimeter at the base of the
Live long and
screen,
prosper.
as well as the speedometer. They are gaining speed on their climb to space. We have confirmed max Q. This is when the aerodynamic stresses on the vehicle were at their maximum.
No sign of Ivanova's law being enacted.
Just over the Kármán line. Yeah, this is about a minute behind what we're watching here.
Okay, we don't need to update. Just group experience.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining us live for New Shepard's second human flight. with Audrey Powers, William Shatner, our customers Glenn DeVries and Chris Bosshausen on board. They are well on their way to space. So far, a nominal flight, a clean burn on our Blue Engine 3. New Shepard giving them a beautiful flight to space this morning. The rocket is climbing towards an altitude. We're aiming just over the Kármán line, the internationally recognized line of space of 100 kilometers. That is about 328,000 feet. And a gorgeous view down the rocket. And now we've had main engine cut off. The BE-3 engine has shut off. And in just a moment, we're going to separate the capsule from the booster. And at that point, our astronauts will have the opportunity to get out of their harnesses and enjoy the beauties of zero G. Let's wait to listen.
You'll notice that I think the cameras are the best on the Blue Origin. And it's not just because I know the person working on it. But it's the most
Did you
stable.
say the cameras are the best?
The camera work. You know, the other ones have been just messy.
No, I will take Tim Dodds on Everyday Astronaut. Thank you very much.
No. I mean for a launch. For a launch.
Yeah, in that case, SpaceX.
The launches are SpaceX that constantly have trouble
They're
with
using
their
the
cameras.
NASA cameras.
Yeah,
They're
that's
using the NASA cameras.
I know, which are not as good.
Why don't we just watch this?
These look like they bought them from Amazon.
I have to admit, I like the graphic design. That bar graph on the left of the progress is useful.
And there they are, over 328,000 feet, over 100 kilometers. Welcome to space.
I'm surprised they've gone back to the original
newest astronauts on
host.
board our
The
crew
comment
capsule.
section over the last few launches have been a bloodbath up until the previous two hosts took over and people actually liked the way they were speaking.
So this Blue Origin went higher than the last Blue Origin, yes?
I think it's at the same height.
I thought
No,
there
it
was
is
some
higher.
controversy about
I
not
think
hitting
it's
the
about
Kármán line.
20 kilometers higher.
At about 351,000 feet.
I would need it in metric to know.
And while we don't have apogee, I can
I'm
just
still amazed that
imagine,
Blue
Jackie,
Origin hasn't swapped
they
to
are
metric
having
like the rest of the
time
world.
of their lives.
Oh, interesting. They switched the bar graph to descending now.
Well, what goes up must come down.
Yeah, but it's a good data design. I mean, it reflects reality.
Don't forget that episode where they grabbed the pilot out of his aircraft and took him away for a while and then returned him later. Could it be happening?
You'll notice they're never showing the interior of the spacecraft.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining us
Yeah,
live from
Blue
West
Origin has
Texas.
copped
So
a fair
far,
bit of
a
criticism
nominal
of
flight for our
that.
second
There's
human crew.
no decent downlink from their
So
vehicle.
exciting, Jackie, to have sent Captain Kirk himself, William Shatner, to space. I cannot wait to hear his commentary upon return, as well as our two
This is
customers,
cool,
Chris
though.
Bosshausen from Australia, to all the fans tuning in from down under. A big shout out to you guys, as well as
Let's see
Glenn
how much it
DeVries
dances
and
around
our
on the
very own
landing
Audrey Powers.
for the
They
booster,
are coming
not the
back
cap.
home. The booster, of course, is going to beat the capsule back home. It is more aerodynamically shaped, of course, at the base of the capsule. It's kind of a blunt end, so it's less aerodynamic. What we're going to see coming up shortly.
It's quite
is
amazing
at
that
the
they are
top of
shooting
the
this
rocket,
this
we have the
image
ring
from
fin,
really
there's,
far away, and they can
some,
keep
what
it
we call
in the
pie
frame.
fins that extend from the ring fin, as well as the drag brakes, the pie fins, the wedge fins, help stabilize
It's a
the
telescopic
vehicle,
system. I mean, it's
kind of
built
the
for
feathers
this
at the back of an
launch.
arrow. And then you will also see the drag
I
brakes.
mean,
as you
literally built for the
mentioned,
launch.
Jackie. It cuts the velocity dramatically. There you can see the wedge fins are out.
Landing was a little scary on the booster.
Yeah, the last few landings of this booster, it has danced around a lot. it almost skidded off the pad on one of them.
The fact that we're landing the boosters is kind of
amazing. When they were landing them on those platforms at sea,
Kind
it
of
blew
cool.
my
It's
mind.
absolutely cool.
Feet or about 1,200 meters above ground level. Let's wait for that now. The drag brakes have deployed. And here we come, New Shepard.
That's the ultimate drone.
Oh, it almost toilet bowls every time they light that thing up.
It's drone shot.
And touchdown. Welcome back,
So
New
cool.
Shepard. The fourth flight to space
Now
is
see,
back
their
for
booster
that
looks better
vehicle.
coming than it does
Provided
going.
A beautiful
I
flight
agree.
to space for our second
Yeah, it just
human crew.
it looks right as it drops down with the air
that
brakes open.
gets me every time we do this live down here in Texas. The sonic boom is so cool. Drag brakes are folding back in, as have the wedge fins. Just looks like you could fuel her up and go again. What do you think, Jackie?
And even when you know to expect the sonic boom, it still catches you off guard every time.
Talk about a rumble. A beautiful sight of our New Shepard rocket there in the West Texas desert. But of course, the show is not over. The capsule is descending. We are waiting for first the drogue chutes to deploy. Those are very much like the guide
Okay,
parachutes.
we'll jump
They
back
will
into the regularly
subsequently
scheduled
be,
program.
Followed by the
Well,
main
they're about to
parachutes
land
that
the,
will
Are they about to
fully,
land, actually? Can we skip
first
forward?
reef and then fully inflate. And there go the drogue parachutes.
Oh, there they are. There's the capsule.
The chutes are open, so it's probably safe to buy Amazon stock today.
Well, the drogues were.
And
Here-
here
now we got the
come
mains.
the mains. Whew, what a flight.
You can almost read Blue Origin on that.
Already start to hear the cheers from outside our stage here in West Texas.
2,000 feet. Wow.
I do love the drone approaching the capsule as it's coming down. It's gorgeous.
And it's drifting, just hanging there for the longest period of time.
Getting
16
audio from
miles
the
an hour. Is
capsule.
that how fast it'll hit at? Must be, because there's no other.
No, there's a rocket thing that fires just before it hits.
Ah, okay. So they'll slow it more.
So that the dust you see being kicked up is actually from the braking rockets firing.
Yeah, the landing. Yeah, it makes sense.
Do we know what altitude they put out the mains?
This shot, it
Up to
looks
them
like
at
it's
about
drifting
2,500, I
sideways
think.
for the longest period of time.
That's gorgeous.
Windless day in Texas.
That's Texas.
And here comes our crew back into the desert.
Newest astronauts 596, 97, 98, and 99.
So the next launch is the 600th astronaut. Who gets to be the 600th?
Standby touchdown.
There we go.
And capsule
Seemed a
touchdown.
little rough.
Welcome
A
back.
little hard
the
landing.
newest astronauts.
Probably got shock scenery.
Initially, you would
William
think so,
Shatner,
but
our
it's actually
customers, Blend of Rees
with
and Chris
the
Boshausen.
rockets firing.
What a day
Right.
That
for
soaks
you.
up the
Welcome
impact.
back. I cannot wait to talk to
Anyway,
them,
there you go.
Jackie, and just
All right.
get
Let's
the experience
let's go
up
back to
there
the
this
regularly
morning.
scheduled
What a clean
program.
and beautiful flight.
They made it. Looking forward to when they. I think that I think I was more impressed with the obviously with SpaceX is that they did a couple orbits. So I think that the Musk is kind of in the billionaire war. He's winning by a lot. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump back into the questions. We're going to go over just a little bit on the questions, then we'll jump into lower thirds. So let's go ahead and next question.
Moving on to the one by Tim Harper. And Tim from Raleigh, North Carolina asks, I want to record an oral history of my dad and his siblings. What's a good budget setup for an audio recording of a conversation between four people in the same room without good mic technique?
I think this gets back into it is easy to make content or easy to listen to it. When you're trying to figure out how you're going to do this, you want to do the work, to get great audio. You're only going to get to do this once, whatever it is. And so I would, really think about, when you think about a budget setup, I mean, it just depends on how usable you want the content to be, so you don't want to wait forever because you can't afford to get something better, because then they'll be gone, so you do want to capture it, but really think about it. Also think about the fact that you're going to have this conversation. You can rent things. You don't have to buy everything. So buying I would strongly recommend something like renting a mix pre, with 32-bit float, so that you could do it, as well as, then you have to think about what kind of mics, and it could be shotguns, it could be lavs, it could be a mixture of both, to make sure you capture it all at one time. But remember, the renting it will be very inexpensive compared to buying it. Now, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, rather than big system, one of the things I might do, since these people none of them are experienced with this, I would think about going out and getting 4 of those inexpensive Zoom H1 type mics that have a decent capsule on them and record individually. Make sure the people don't sit around a really close table so that there is a reasonable amount of distance between each person. Then start all the mics, let them talk away. That way you'll have to do it in post. You'll have to do the mix of who's speaking now, but I would think you would that way keep the microphone close to each individual and not try to do any diverse thing or manage multiple microphones. That's how I'd probably approach it.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Just on an artistic basis for this sort of thing, if the mic's in shot, it doesn't matter. The sound is far more important for telling the history here than any camera shot you could put in this room. I would look at having a couple of, or 2 pairs of the Rode Go 2s, so you've got a microphone literally on anyone, put it on a collar, put it on a pocket, on a shirt, and just get the recording absolutely perfect for the sound.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, what amazed me is even the DV cameras had really good audio potential if you went in on line level. So I would get a little mixer or whatever your Rode Go to, something like that was a great suggestion. And then I would run it actually into a camera. You think you don't want video on this, but I guarantee you at some point in time you probably do. And number one is make sure the environment they're in doesn't have a loud air conditioner or a refrigerator or something that's just going to add a noise. You can go after the noise later, but it's just much easier if you just pick a very quiet environment to start with.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I'd recommend a Zoom F6. You can rent one or buy one. Buy one on about $600 to $700. It has auto mix and it has 32-bit float. I'd plug 4 lavaliers into it and clip it outside. Don't bury it, and put it outside their clothing so that you don't have to worry about them leaning off mic or not holding a hand mic where it should be. And record everything ISO'd, and then you can also have a mix track on that, record at the same time with the auto mix turned on.
Next question.
Ted Claudio in Quezon City, Philippines says, what's a good budget VR controller with a base station that can be used as a tracker for movement of the camera used in a virtual green screen production using Unreal Engine?
I don't know. I mean, I would probably look at Blacktracks as the thing that I would probably lean towards, is try to figure that out and how that would integrate. I don't know if it's a clean integration, but that would be something I would probably think about. Next question.
Moving on, Douglas Carmichael's back again with another one. And he asks, could you see applications of spatial audio for content like cooking shows, Mad in the Kitchen, for example? I could see some interesting uses for it to position the viewer, quote, from the cook's perspective.
As you're watching these, you're going to see spatial. We're going to experiment a lot with it in shows. You're going to see spatial become more and more important because it makes you feel like you're there. Again, this isn't something that you need. It's not something that, that's there. But again, you'll start to go into these spaces where you hear the clanking of the pans and you feel like you're in the room. And if you have headphones on, you'll feel like you're there. And again, that's going to make it more. A lot of what we get into when we talk about those things are the how the viewer feels, as opposed to what they notice. And so you'll see more of that as we go through that. All right, let's Chris is they're still in there. They're up there. There they come.
They just arrived at the recovery team just arrived at the capsule, and they're running around and waving at everybody in the window. Everything's good.
Yeah, very good. All right, let's jump to the first question of the second hour.
Okay, we start out with Danny Law from Malaysia, and Danny asks, are there certain typefaces to avoid for legibility's sake when showing on lower thirds?
Go ahead, Bill.
In the old days of broadcast, the standard was you wanted to keep away from serifs. Serifs are the little decorative elements of type you see on some fonts, and little spindly fonts. That's because the raster used to be pretty gross. Again, this is another thing where I think it's still a good idea to try to stay away from too fancy. We are getting higher and higher resolution, and some people have 4K and even 8K televisions now, where these things will not be important because it has all the resolution needed to take care of really fine type and things. But for right now, the old rules of relatively large fonts, because people will often be looking at these on small things, a lot of contrast between your type and the background so that it's clear and not messed up by a moving background or something, and the cleanest looking bold type that you can use. That's kind of the starting place.
Tuomo?
I think Bill already touched on most of the important bits. Just one thing to mention here, that cheap fonts, free fonts, they might have issues with kerning, meaning the character spacing. So that is one thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Courtney?
Yeah, they covered most of it. Stay away from narrow fonts because the kerning tends to be closer together, and it can be difficult because letters will run together on lower resolution screens. But not everybody's watching high resolution, so you got to keep that in.
And you got to open speaker. Someone does. Someone's got an open mic. Next question.
Moving on, Danny Law from Malaysia is back with another one, and this case he says, what would be, oops, I mishit it somehow, that's weird. What would be the smallest font size that are generally acceptable on lower thirds?
And I can't see it because it's in the answer. Just raise your hand if you have an answer for that. Tuomo?
I do, yeah. So there is not a number what you can put onto this thing because screen sizes and everything is different. So there are several things to keep in mind. It has to be clear. So what I would like to propose is to set up some kind of an environment where you can sort of like simulate your output and then degrade the quality of it somehow, reduce the color contrast, make it grayscale, something that you can see that if it still pops out and it is readable, then you are in a safe place.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Several years ago with one of my clients, we did extensive amount of testing because we were creating everything at 1920, 1080. But most stuff was actually going out in social and phones and stuff at 640, 360. So we had to do tests of various font sizes, compress them down, and then submit them to their lawyers for the lawyers to say, I deem this legible.
Right.
And so for us, I think it ended up being at like 32 points that we could create at 1080.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's a little bit of variability to this in this respect. You probably had the experience of changing your monitor resolution and watching a page of text get substantially smaller. Same page of text, same code, but it looks different. When you're sending type out to a variety of people with a variety of computers at a variety of resolutions with a variety of monitors, I always just say err on the side of bigger and more legible when you're doing your design, because you never know when somebody's going to be seeing it on something with a really fine pixel raster and it might get really small looking. It'd be hard to read.
Yeah. So right now we build everything at UHD. So all of our lower thirds are built at 3840 by 2160, but we view everything at 640 by 360. So we scale everything down and output it at 640 by 360, and we make sure that it's comfortably legible at that resolution. And then we build them all. And the reason we build them all at 4K is because I don't have to build them again. Like, it is so much creative time, and all I have to do is scale it down to get to 1080. So building it, what we get into over and over and over again is people build rasterized graphics at at 1080, and then someone asks for a 4K stream, and now we have to go back and rebuild the whole thing from scratch because we didn't do it the first time. So it's just easier to just build everything at 4K. All you're doing is oversampling. It just looks a little bit, the anti-aliasing just looks that much better when you scale it down. And so those, it's just, but don't get into the trap. Just build it at 4K. But the problem we get into is we get people who design at 4K, and then they design the characters for 4K, and then you look at it on your phone, it's completely unreadable. So 640 by 360 is what we want it to be read at. Next question.
Next question, David Brady in New York is up next with how difficult would it be for the SPX-GC or H2R to leverage Blackmagic's API as Blue Titler does? This would enable some pretty slick transitions, he says, and has a link there.
Go ahead, Tuomo.
So SPX is new. We are in version 1.0 point something, and these discussions in office hours has already added a ton of stuff to our whiteboard, all kinds of functionality what needs to be looked into. And ATEM and Blackmagic overall is something that we will really look into and take care that our API can talk to ATEM devices. So that is something on our roadmap. It's not there yet.
Yeah, it's such a big market now. The ATEM market is probably the biggest switcher market at the moment, as far as installed base. So it's I think that we'll keep on seeing more feature sets in that area. Next question.
Georgie Kennedy Jr. here from the panel from Washington, D.C. Would it be possible to tie the SPX graphics to lower thirds to mix effects super sources?
Tuomo?
I think we will need to do a little sit down with George, and he will need to show me what he means. but yeah, I will. This is also one of those things that I will need to look into it, and let's see if we can do it.
Go ahead, George.
So when I mentioned tying into mix effects, let me just clean my screen up here, and I'm going to switch over. Just put a few things down the bottom here. So I need to get rid of 1 second.
So, but what you're talking about is you want to mix effects, of course, is running the ATEM, and what you want to be able to do is when it calls out for something for the ATEM, you want that graphic to come up inside of SPX.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Give me 1 second here while I fix this. All right, here we go. Sorry, now we don't have that feedback. Get rid of myself. Can everyone see my screen?
We can.
All right, so let me, I'm just gonna step down here across the line. So right now I have my, so I've been talking to him over the past couple of days, and one of my biggest things is for many of us, we've been using the Stream Decks in our workflows. So I wanted to figure out how, there was a bug, and I have to give kudos to him. It's been fixed in 72 hours. So this is a 4-up right now, and I know we don't necessarily want to put lower thirds on a 4-up or a 6-up or 8-up, but in the functionality right now, he was able to go ahead and fix it. That way I could key the Stream Deck to bring on all 4 of those titles at the same time. And I could hit it again and take it out. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to a 2-shot, and I'm able to bring in a lower third on the 2-shot also. What I do want to say for the 2-shot, you're able to, I'm going to go into my visual editor, and what I could go ahead and do is, I think it's called skew. So I'm going to put a -15 on it. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. I'm going to bring the graphic out. I'm going to punch it back in. So you could, this is just the basic template, but you can definitely do some other work with some of his larger templates. So you're able to go ahead and change your design a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. I'm going to hit save again and bring that graphic out and punch it back in, and it'll change back. This is a single shot. Actually, I need to take that off screen. I could go ahead and punch in a lower third. And what I could do also is go ahead and bring in a URL. And what I've done is tied on the URL in, I've tied it back to my lower third. That way, when I hit my lower third, it'll go ahead and take everything out. So that's just a little bit of functionality that he has helped to bring forth. And I think what he said this morning, let me bring myself back to screen. What he just told me this morning that he's, with the 4-up you just saw, he's able now to bring up to 8 of those titles on screen. So you'll be able to set it up in the Stream Deck and bring 8 titles on if you have a person of 8-panel or 6-panel on screen.
Right. And the big thing for us is data paths, because, for instance, we, the way that we're planning to do it with office hours is that with all those graphics, those lower thirds are all generated automatically from people's profile profiles, the panelist profiles inside of Makana. So basically it just goes and says with Zoom ISO and Zoom OSC, I know who's in every frame. So it puts in the frame, and all you have to do is hit lower third. You don't have to figure out whose name it is. It figures it all out and puts it all in there for you. So figuring out the data paths, we're building kind of a very complex web between all the developers, which is exciting. All right, next question.
Dave Kaufman's up next from Vancouver, British Columbia. He says they're called lower thirds, but are they really there? Seems most are lower fifths.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, this goes into the history of television. In the early days, we used electron beams to scan televisions. Not everyone's beam scanned the whole raster. So you actually had a title safe, well, you had an action safe area, and then you had a title safe area that was much smaller, probably, I don't know, 1/8 of the screen in from the center. 10%. So those graphics actually did go through the third of the screen. Things get named early today there's 2-tier, 3-tiered lower thirds with multiple, font size and all that. So you have to go back through the history to see where the naming came from.
Go ahead, Charles.
I'm in the middle of 2 show packages right now, and the lower third just seems like it's arbitrary from that point of view, because some of the graphics are almost going full screen and then settling it down to a lower third, the very big 3D stuff. Most of the stuff that we've done depends for the client. If it's more finance, it does tend to sit very calmly. But some of like the Nat Geo stuff, it can go all over the screen, like sports graphics.
Yeah.
It just go everywhere. So it just depends what the final output is.
Yeah, I mean, as Roscoe said, it came historically. We're also seeing a lot more, and I don't have. I'm going to show some examples, but I don't have the examples right here. But a lot of them are coming into the side like this too, because you don't know what's going on down below. So we don't know. We have all kinds of stationary graphics, show graphics, and so we're starting to pull them in. That they just kind of leak over. And I think Alex Goldner showed a couple of those with BBC. Kind of doing IDs, and IDs in many ways is a more accurate way to call it, but the IDs coming in from the side over one side, and that kind of gets out of I don't have to figure out where the bugs are or where there's stuff that's going to stay up there or anything else. I just put it in there. But one thing we will look at in the one is how you have to design the package around all the things you have to do. Like it's easy to think about a lower third where you see mistakes are people only thinking about the lower third and not thinking about where's their 4-up and where are the extra graphics and where will the bug be. And you'll see this in broadcast where they start stacking on top of each other. There'll be a bug on top of a lower third, or there'll be a lower third that doesn't go nicely over top of something else. And that's just because they were designed at different times and they weren't taking it into account the other graphics that might be on the screen. Next question.
Justin Emanuel at Staten Island, New York is up next, and he says best practice for how long to show a lower third for.
Go ahead, Charles.
It depends on what is on the lower third. If it's a name, our usual practice is 4 to 5 seconds, depending on the edit and the visual flow of everything. If you have data and a message inside of the lower third, what we usually do is bring a few of the team members to read it out in their head and see how long it takes, and then we'll do on the longer side of the average, just to make sure that people can actually read it, because you never know. It could be somebody that doesn't know the language or anything like that. So,
right. Bill?
Everything Charles said, it's an it depends kind of thing. I have my default set for bringing in titles in at 6 seconds. I almost always shorten them from there, and it's a process of feel. It depends on the pace. Also, if it's just a talking head and there's nothing else going on the screen, they can look at the title and then come up when they want to. If it's a lower third over an active scene, there may be something in the scene that pulls their eye up. I'll tend to leave them on a little longer so that if they need to go away from the lower third to see some action, then come back to finish up a title. It's just a matter of taste and paying attention.
Good, Chris.
In post, and you can do this live as well, a lot of times there'll be a slight gap in the discussion. Lose the key, and that's where I'll drop the key out. I'll listen to the dialogue, and so that might be 4 to 6 seconds, something like that.
And one thing you have to be careful of in having things hang too long is that you're trying to cut a show. So you have to find where to put that lower third as well, because if you're on the fast cut, you can't do it. And so you have to wait until you get to a moment where they're going to talk for a second. And a lot of times when we design the shows, we try to think about that, so that we're going to cut to this person and we're going to hang on them, and not have a bunch of other graphics coming in at that moment, because we know that a lower third has to go in there right now. And then you put it in. For me, I start at 2 seconds in, 2 seconds out, and a 5 seconds in the middle. And on the way out, I fade it out. I don't usually do an animation on the way out. And the reason I don't do that is so that I can cut away from it without anyone noticing something was missing. So, if I'm going to do an animation, I'm going to do it on the way in, but I'm never going to do it on the way out. I mean, for me, we've had clients that do that. They wanted to animate on its way out. And the problem with that is that it makes it more noticeable when you cut away from it, for the viewer. Next question.
Dave Kaufman in Vancouver, British Columbia. Up next, I have a personal dislike for stock ticker horizontal text scrolling. Is that just me, or is it shared by the panelists?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I don't have any particular anything against it particularly, but the pacing of motion is a big deal when frame rates are involved, because certain things can look chunky as they go across, and especially with rolling titles the same way. So you do have to spend a little time just testing to see what exact motion speed looks the smoothest to the viewer. And you have to go all the way through the system, unfortunately, because sometimes at the end point is where that stuttering comes in, and you may not be able to control that.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, what Roscoe said about if you're watching it streaming, you got to make sure you have a frame rate that's not going to screw things up and make it very distracting. But it depends. Like CNN, for example, uses that bottom scrolling ticker to show other news. So if you're looking at the screen for information and let's say you're not interested in what's on the top half of the screen, you can look down and read other news at the bottom. So it depends on your taste on whether you want to use it as an informational base that gives you other information than what you're watching.
It increases view time. It's proven to. So adding more text to the screen increases the amount of time someone's willing to do it. Because as Courtney said, you're willing to look at other things while the talking heads are boring. So talking heads by themselves, run into. It's not that they're always boring. They are, but when they get into a dead patch that just doesn't work very well, you're more likely to hang on to the show than when you with other things going on. If they're boring and there's no graphics or no other news, you're more likely to leave and go somewhere else. And that's one of the big reasons they use it. Go ahead, Charles.
I second everything that was just said. It also depends on the panel and TV that you have. We've noticed in the studio we'll have the newer panels, and the scrolling text looks very smooth and it's comforting to the eye. On older panels, you get the stuttering, and it stresses people out. But yes, if you can have more information on screen, based on the times that we live in, as people watch TV, they're on their phone, they have their iPad, they have everything else, and they are taking more information in. So if you can have it on the screen, it does tend to retain viewership.
Go ahead, Chris.
Never occurred to me that it would increase view time. That's super interesting. Is there actual linkable studies to show that?
They're not linkable, but there was a lot of studies.
Got it. And then the other thing that I would say
lots
is
of studies.
I read super slow. To me, it's literally just noise. But if I watch the news with my wife, she's like, she'll start reacting to something. And I go, what are you talking about? She goes, it's on the bottom. I was like, oh, I never look at it. I literally, it's just noise for me.
Yeah, Bill.
Since you were talking about moving type, it stuck with me, particularly in movie credits. In the early days, compression can destroy them. I can't tell you how many times I was watching something like MTV that showed something with old credits that had clearly been done for a movie. They were very high resolution. They did a fine transfer. But when it got down to the compression that they put against them, the type, the small type just went to heck in a handbasket. I mean, it was literally gobbledygook. It looked like alien text. So pay attention. If you're going to compress things for a smaller thing, make sure that you compensate by making your titles bigger.
Go ahead, Tuomo.
So yeah, tickers are hypnotic. So they do actually force you to watch the screen. And but there's one thing what I would like to bring here is that not all tickers has to be scrolling, because there's a concept of a flipping ticker as well. I have on my screen here, I have a flipping ticker. So it doesn't scroll across the screen. It just shows up one piece of information at once.
That's really nice.
And then it flips to another one, and then it flips to another one. If you look at the big international news stations, they quite often they have chosen to use flipping tickers instead of a scrolling one.
That's great. I really like that. I haven't seen that very much. It's not. I think I haven't seen it in the U.S. at least very much, but that's a great idea. The tickers are also good if you're doing a live event, not news, and you're doing a live event. It is a great way to take comments from the audience and create a positive feedback loop. So it's not in the current like what we show everybody here from Makana, but we have a feature that will just I can take comments out of a chat and just throw them into a ticker. Just go send that to the ticker, send that to the ticker, send that to the ticker. And so you can just take the best comments. And what it does is it gives people positive feedback that they're being heard. It also gives you a positive reinforcement for positive questions, or positive comments. And so you get more, because you're not going to put any negative comments in the ticker. So people start putting, it actually creates positivity in the chat fields, because people are trying to get into the ticker. Anyway, so there's a little behavioral process there as well. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, is up next with, I have a nonprofit fundraiser coming up in a few weeks, and I'm trying to come up with a good way to format the cumulative pledge total as a lower third, and everything seems cheesy. Any novel suggestions for design?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I will say, and this is a comment in the form of a compliment, I would look into Tuomo's stuff. Everything he's shown, I think, is classy, looks great, polished, broadcast,
and
the opposite of cheesy.
The main thing, Tuomo. Yeah, and it does really look really good, and I think that I think one of the things you want to think about is it's just a matter of figuring out the data path. So you're going to publish the total to a web page somewhere, and something has to read it, and whether the graph, you just have to know what is the hook for it to read that data, and then it can post it automatically. So go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to compliment Tuomo's because his looks fabulous. And one of the things that I struggled with in the past is that art directors tended not to have a lot of experience in text for video. They usually worked in magazine or some sort of visual arts. And so they would tend to make things that look great on the page, but fell apart when you're mapping that to a relatively gross television raster. So I just hope more and more people get into this broadcast design stuff and make them as good as his are.
Go ahead, Tuomo.
So one idea just which came to me in the question was that how can you show something interesting on screen? And this is just an
you muted yourself, Tuomo, there. I think when you hit that.
Sorry, I have to start again. So
you're muting yourself again. I think that's something connected. Your mute and your graphics are somehow connected there.
Yeah, I have to focus in the wrong window. Sorry.
Okay.
So
can you do that again? We didn't see it. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
So what I was about to show you was that this is a graphic done for a live what do you call that? Sort of like a music show, and the viewers could vote those songs on Facebook. And each one of those votes would generate a particle. So all of the likes were particles. So this is one idea that if somebody is giving something, or something positive happens, you can trigger a graphic. And this is actually a particle generator. So it's going to generate 12,000 particles, and then it's going to fade out. And now if I trigger it out and bring it back in for the second time, and if I let it run for a little while and then I stop it, you will see that it's not going to emit any more particles. So I can control how many particles it's generating. Great. So this is just one of the ways how to use on-screen graphics to sort of like in this era where we are not in an audience, live audience, but we would like to have some kind of a feeling of a participation.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that's great about that is that you're able to take over that rather than depending on the social network to do it. I mean, you're getting the social network info, but the most we can get rid of all that generalized debris, that comes with social networks would be great. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, whatever you're doing, that was a great example of a graphic from Tuomo there that looks exciting. I would not leave anything up perpetually because in a nonprofit fundraiser, you want to create some excitement around announcing a total and progress toward your goal. So you come back to it several times, but don't leave it up, because if you leave it up, people will see how far you are and they may not continue to contribute. So, and a lot of times they use thermometers or vertical displays so that it shows your progress toward a goal, which isn't easy to do in a lower third.
We've worked on some fundraisers where also people check it off when they give the money, but they're like, can we thank you, like on air? And they'll check it off that you can thank them, and anything over a certain number shows up on the graphic. So they're putting the money in, and we've done a couple where there's like 48-hour streams, and we're running all this stuff, and that ticker actually stays on the whole time. But the main thing is that it you're constantly seeing that number moving. And when people put in $1,000 or $100 or whatever, it goes boom. Like it's a little bit of what Tuomo was talking about. It was like, kind of has this little thing, and it's a different graphic based on how much money they gave, and it definitely works. So and so the other thing is that the more money on it, the longer it hangs as well. And what happened there was, what we found was that businesses started, because there was a lot of viewers. I mean, we were having, tens of thousands of viewers, and sometimes it got into the low hundreds of thousands of viewers. What businesses realized is it was a relatively cheap advertisement. They're showing their connection and their support of the thing. And so they would, we started seeing $1,000, $2,000 from some business that thought that they could just get in front of that many people for a relatively, the cost per thousand turned out to not be very much. So they ended up generating a lot of revenue because of that positive reinforcement. But you do want to have a checkbox that says, I'm okay with that, for the donor, when they put it in. And most of them are. Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand is up next. He says, I've been playing with OBS browser items for a lower third. What size should I use? For example, 1024 by 200 is one I have now, as noticed in a Zoom interview. I had the video feed and I had my text off screen despite my testing in after hours. Should I match my webcam's resolution, or what's his target?
Yeah, I think that I don't know as much about OBS to know what the right resolution is. I mean, we'll show there's a couple things you have to think about as your viewers. Most of the time we can now assume that our viewers are watching our show. Now, here's where it gets complicated: is are they watching it at 16 by 9 or 9 by 16? And your graphics now become an entirely different problem at 9 by 16, because now they all need to be sitting at the bottom. And we're seeing some people, some of our clients are doing streams at 9 by 16, and we're doing. We've had a couple where we've done center cuts, of it. And it gets more complicated when we start designing around it. So you can actually design where that 16 by 9 is going and push it back and forth, but it's two streams. It's one that's going out at 16 by 9, another one that's going out at 9 by 16, and they have entirely two different graphics packages. And then you have to tie the automation to both of those so that they show the same information, just in the different format. And so it makes it complicated. Next question.
Tuomo here on the panel is got another question here. He says, do people in the industry still refer to on-screen graphics as chyrons, or something older or other historical title for them?
Go ahead, Charles.
So from what I've seen, the tilting point is depending on how much gray hair you have.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Stuart. No,
gray hair, yes. Oh, by the way, steel, not grey. But yes, chyron is one of those words that's even made it into the dictionary as a word for graphics. And the company that's responsible for it, if I just hit Control Tab, will give me...
Yeah, it was
they're still live, they're still working, they're still making great products.
Yeah. So, and Chyron is definitely one of the stalwarts of they were the first I don't know if they're the first ones, but they definitely became the largest in large broadcast, where you just knew that a Chyron was what you were going to, and so people do call it Chyron, but a lot of people call it the font is a popular one. Just throw roll the font. And that's another one. It's just general idea for words. There's also a strap. So in the UK, when we do events, everything's a strap, or referred to as that. Go ahead, Chris.
Bryant Gumbel in the United States in the 80s popularized two words on the Today Show, the morning show. He would often ask for a chyron or an ATA. ATA was a still store back in the day. Do we have that ATA? And it was kind of interesting that he brought a little of the technology to the audience.
Yeah, Roscoe.
This kind of goes back to the finger snapping from the first hour, but chyron showed up in a lot of the production trucks, and it's a word that the director can yell out that you immediately know what it means. It's chyron, and then the chyron would go up onto whatever they were producing for that particular show. So that's another reason I think the word stuck around.
And the note to what Chris was just saying is that, I'm sure he did it on purpose too, to give the audience a little feel like they're behind the scenes, like like saying that. I bet you he did it on purpose, to just let people feel like they're part of it.
I can't remember what the word was, but I was talking about taking a frame grab. I think I used the phrase frame grab of your phone. I was asking my daughter, give me a frame grab of that. She looks at me. She's like, what? She just thought I was from another planet.
Next question.
John Foltz in Saloons Grove, Pennsylvania. Up next with Katuomo. Quickly show how he modified HTML templates. I was confused where to do that.
It's a difficult question because these templates can be very different depending on for what purpose it has been built. But if we are talking about the default template which comes with the application, there is a, let me show it up here. Within SPX there is a subfolder called assets, and within that there is templates, and within those there are directories for different template packs, and this one is the default one. I'm not sure if you can see this very clearly, but there is a README file here, and the README file is a PDF file which is going to give you some instructions on how to do customizations. And in quite a lot of these templates there is a specific file to do the customizations in, and in this instance it is called a customize.css, and you can open it up in any text editor, and when you open it up you can see that there are explanations what these things do, and if you know any CSS you can change these values, you can change colors, fonts, and so on. So take a look at the README file which comes with the template.
Next question.
Moving on, Georgie Kennedy, our longtime panelist who's up today, says Justin Bieber's World the Concert movie is on Prime. Why is his graphics outside the safety? It's falling off the screen.
Go ahead, George.
So I was just only watching it for the cuts. So I was taking a look at it.
You're not part of the Bieber posse?
Go ahead.
I'm glad to see Charles is going to chime in. So I was watching it, and I did go to a different television, and it was doing the same. And I'm trying to figure out, did no one QC this, because his graphics was actually falling out of the margin. It was like off to the side of the screen. So I'm just curious, Charles, what happened there?
Good, Charles.
Well, that's interesting. I saw it with some friends, but we streamed it from our computer to the TV, and we did not for the cuts.
For the color.
No. Yeah,
for the cuts.
No, but we didn't see that. But we haven't just streamed it on an Apple TV or anything like that. Now, that being said, I will usually recognize if graphics are really, really close to title safe or action safety, but I did not get that impression. So now I'm interested in seeing that, because that would be
because on the iPhone it's fine. So maybe it's just the Apple TV that's doing something weird.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Is it possible that the aspect ratio was something wider than 16:9, but somebody mistakenly blew it up to fill the letter boxes?
Maybe. I know. Yeah.
When you watched it, Charles and George, was it full height on a 16:9 TV?
No, for me it was almost distorted. It was just like you said, it was almost stretched, and it was outside the margin. So I suspect that maybe it's the Apple TV, and maybe it's the Prime app of itself.
Maybe somebody is like angry at black pixels, and they were just, let's just stretch this up, fill the frame, and didn't think about it's just a wild possibility.
It's possible that if it was delivered without a letterbox, if it was just delivered as raw pixels, it would get stretched automatically. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you covered most of it. The aspect ratio differences can be handled differently depending upon the display and the carrier. So if they shot it in 233 or 185, if they wanted to make it look more like a movie, a lot of times they'll make them in 233 letterbox, and some displays will zoom that in to fill the top and bottom, and when they zoom that in, you lose left and right.
I will say that for most of our streams, we just ignore title safety at this point. So it's just, it is... We use the edges all the time. Like we just, the lower thirds are now, it's more the culture, because we're like 99% of the folks that are watching are not in an overscan situation. And so, and the ones that are not our target audience. So, we've completely gone to ignoring title safe and action safe, from our perspective. Next question.
which is exactly on that. Lenny Nelson says from San Antonio, is title safe still necessary?
Go ahead, Bill.
And so the question is, what do you mean by necessary? Is it required by broadcast because that's where everything's going to go and the old bezels of the TV used to know?
Everything, it's where everything used to go.
Right. That's where everything used to be. And that's the old style. But I will make an argument for keeping a margin around things. And the argument has to do with the newest displays that are edge to edge. The newest Apple Watch is a good example of that. It literally uses pixels right up to the edge of the display. I think there are going to be smaller and smaller bezels coming up, and that edge to edge possibility is going to get bigger and bigger. And if you take an iPad that has almost no margin around it and put it in a case or some kind, you will potentially get little pieces on the edges knocked off in the future. That's my belief. So I'm going to keep to the old standards of a little bit of margin. I also think it's good design not to go edge to edge unless you're trying to do something you're designing for full bleed, what they used to call full bleed in the printing industry.
I've never thought of QCing on a watch. I haven't thought about that. Like, how does my stream look on a watch? I have to figure this out. That'd be a new. That'd be a new thing.
It's going to come.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Bill pretty much nailed it. Yeah, it's what they call white space in design. And like if you look at the FedEx logo, it has interesting because it has white space in one corner and the other corner. So it has FedEx logo might go right to the edges just because that's the way they've designed it. But my biggest thing is uppercase and lowercase. You got to use uppercase and lowercase. Please don't shout at us with all these titles and stuff. Please, the human eye is much better at looking at the shape of a word than it is actually reading the word.
I find it funny that a really common thing to see in lower thirds is a camel cap for the first name and all caps on the second name. It's Alex Lindsay, and that's a really common thing to see. Go ahead, Charles.
For most of the stuff that we do now, we tend to go as close to the edge as possible. But here's the thing that I would say, just as a visual rhythm and just aesthetics, we'll run the graphics to the edge and beyond, but the text or anything that we want to read will move to seem like it's action safe or maybe title safe, but 10 to 15% from the edge of the screen seems to feel the best on iPads or large screens, maybe like your phone, just to have some space to breathe. So aesthetically.
Yeah, text, we definitely put it there, but our graphics come right up to the edge now. Like, we're definitely pulling that all the time. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, title safe came from the old technology of CRT technology, where it was scanned from top to bottom, and the size of the raster varied from TV set to TV set. So title safe lets you accommodate different scans on TV rasters. And since they shut off the analog broadcast, which would go to most CRT-type TVs, title safe has not been much of an issue because they transmit edge to edge, and most displays are digital pixel-perfect displays and don't really crop anything.
Right. Next question.
Nate Hill, Salt Lake City, Utah. On many corporate broadcasts, the titles or credentials can be really long. The result is ugly multi-line lower thirds. What are some of your solutions to that problem?
Go ahead, Charles.
Find a creative solution in whichever way you can, but also remember you're there to solve their problem. And especially with pharma or finance companies, it's a lot of information. So at the end of the day, it's all going to be approved by the legal team. So you make it look as pretty as possible. At the end of the day, they say yay or nay. So, yeah.
Good, Chris.
I've tried to use solutions like Tuomo was showing where the thing rotated, like here's part of the information. Oh, here's a little more. What I find is that in the corporate world, most people have a hard time remembering that our videos live in multiple dimensions. There's a vertical resolution, a horizontal resolution, but there's also the dimension of time. And you might want to show somebody, well, look, here's part of it and here's the rest of it. But they have an extremely difficult time. They have a difficult time understanding that the amount of time is part of the equation. The answer to the question, I think, is in the thing. On many corporate broadcasts, the result is ugly. Yeah. That's pretty much because they're going to want to see it. They have to see it. They either need to brag or their legal has to show it.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of have to let it go sometimes.
Right, Tuomo.
You can always try to ask your client if they want to make it nice or the way they want it, but that can be difficult. So one way to work around it is to use voice. If you can introduce the person and then just use one of their shorter version of their title, like CEO, and not just put all the divisions and everything behind it. So that could be one option.
Yeah, the wetware version of this, of what I do a lot of times, is one thing that corporate is particularly sensitive to is feeling like they're cool like the kids, these days, and there's a lot of like, well, it kind of signals that you're, the reason we try to make it shorter is because it kind of signals old media, signals older, an older thought process. Then, you don't see that very often on YouTubers, everything's a lot simpler, and that really talks to a certain audience. And, I say it as an aside, and if they don't catch on to it, then I just keep doing whatever they want to do, but about 70% of the time it gets cut down. Like something comes back after you make there's a concept that I use, and probably shouldn't say this on YouTube, which is I call it poison pills. And so I'll drop something that seems like an aside into a conversation that's a poison pill that will not actually be useful right now. It'll fester in someone's mind, and then they'll come back and want to do something different. But so you don't have to win the argument at that moment. You just drop this little thing into the water and then let that kind of do its thing. And if it doesn't, you just do whatever they want to ask. At the end, you're the soldier, they're the general, and you just tell me which hill you want me to take and I'll take it. So I'm very, I'm fine to do whatever you want, but I will drop these little things like, hey, we might lose a lot of people up there. Just saying, like this is all uphill and they're on the top, and so, but just saying that, and then you leave it and you just do whatever you're going to do, and so that's the, go ahead, Chris.
A lot of times along those lines, I'll tell people, I will always give you my opinion, and then I will give you what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's usually what happens is when I work with clients, the first meeting they have, I'm usually the most argumentative about what they're doing. It's like, da-da-da. And then as soon as they say, no, this is the way we want to do it, I never argue again. Like it's just, like I'm just now here to, we hash out what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And then I just want to do what you want to do. Like, that's all I want to do is make it exactly the way you want it, and that's, but you do have to learn to fold back. I think we have people that don't learn to fold back, and then they don't end up with the client again, or we don't if they're working for us. So we try to avoid that. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is back with, can Tuomo go over how he set up the vote to particle link in SPX-GC?
How easy is that to show, Tuomo? Is that an after hours thing or another?
Yeah, that might be an after hours thing. But one thing to keep in mind, Christmas is very soon. So you are going to see on all of the web pages, you are going to see snowfalls, snowflakes falling. That's what it is. So you just go there and take it from there, and you can implement that as a part of your template.
Yeah, we'll probably do some more. We'll find some after hour time to do some of these labs. It'll be a lot of fun. Next question.
Next question from Ted Claudio in Quezon City, Philippines. What's the best way or platform software to show results from data sources? Google Forms, Google Sheets, like for scores, tallies, and so forth for ATEM setups?
I don't know how everybody does it. We send tables. So we push table information out, or we ask for tables that are within a web page, and then we go grab them. So I don't know exactly how to do that. We're doing that programmatically. I don't know exactly. I don't even know if you could grab the information from forms or sheets. What you need is a pretty raw table that's sitting, that is available to the system, and that it can go look at that page and grab the data. That's been the most effective. We use that for like race scores and positions and time frames, and all those things are things that we ask the client, like, build us a table of how you're going to send us the data, and then we go grab it, or we send it to them that way. But that's usually how we've approached it. Go ahead, Tuomo.
There are a lot of websites which are doing data processing, and they quite often have a Google Sheets API or integration, so they can generate a Google Sheet document, and that you can read with some kind of a script solution. Mm-hmm. Actually, George showed me earlier a solution what he's using to bringing data using a text message.
Oh, yeah. Next question.
Comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he asks for Tuomo again. How are you generating the particle effects with SPX-GC? Is it pure HTML5?
Pure, yes. So no animations. Everything is done in real time.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Alex, he asks, I like your idea about using flipping tickers as a positive audience feedback loop. What formats would Makana create to connect to SPX-GC, for example?
We just talked to Tuomo about what he wants. The advantage of having a programmer building this all the time is that, what we do is we just interact with the designer and we say, what would be the best way for us to do this? And then they tell us, and then Chris writes it in like an hour. Because it's just, for us, it's just raw data in a table. So it's just a matter of putting it somewhere in a format that makes sense. And so we're already doing that we're doing that with Andy Carluccio when we're dealing with 2.0, is that we're delivering him the data that he needs to put lower thirds and process, and all that stuff is all being like, for instance, when you hit the answer button, when Bill hits the answer button right now, it puts it on a page that Andy can read, and that's going to help us activate things later. So those are all there. We probably send Tuomo a connection to that first. Say, hey, is this going to work? and then it probably will. So, but if not, we would just customize it. Next question.
Comes from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. It's a follow-up to a previous question and Alex's answer. He says, I'm very experienced with CSS, so how do I cater to a Zoom host different resolutions to mine in WRT, HTML, CSS as a lower third?
I'm afraid you're outside of my skill set, and we don't have anybody else with a hand up. So we may have to deal with this in after hours, because I don't deal with that directly. I think in pixels and graphics. So next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He said, let's say you wanted to use a 3D graphic as part of a lower third. Would you get a model from TurboSquid if needed if you needed a model quickly? How would you render the model at a level that wouldn't degrade at a small size?
Go ahead, Charles.
So it depends on what the animation of the model is going to be. What I've usually had to do in the past is that, say, if it's a speaker company, for example, you have to build out all the segments that you want to separate within the animation. Now that's on the extreme side. If you want something similar, so like it's just going to be like a Statue of Liberty or something like that, you could get that off a side or anything like that. Now, as you bring it down, let's say into a lower third, just preview everything at the scale that you're going to be outputting to, just to make sure that you're not losing the detail that you think that you might have. Because yeah, you should make everything in 4K, but as you start to bring it down, okay, view it in smaller screen sizes, just to make sure that the detail that you're expecting is actually still there. But it depends on what you want to do with the animation.
A lot of times you have to simplify a lot of the graphics so that they're readable. So there's, it doesn't make as much sense when they have tons and tons of little particulate of graphics and you make it really small. You just lose it. It just turns into mush. So a lot of times you simplify those things. You may start with a lower resolution. We just did a whole bunch of this recently, and what we found is that, for instance, you want to reduce all the little edges that you would have had. There's lots of little mortises and things, and you simplify that all down so that it looks good in a nice small one. One thing to look at is to get ideas around that. Do a search inside of iStock for like isometric buildings, and what you're going to see is a thought process of making it simple, because they simplify those in those types of graphics. And so that's what you have to kind of think through. Now, as far as rendering those graphics, you'll render them out as a 3D. We're using more and more of motion to actually render the 3D. So we'll take the 3D objects and put them in. There's some issues that we'll talk about in the future. Not that we're going to try to train everybody here to know how to do, but you can render it. You can actually have them all in motion and just have them all building around and animating and rendering those out as sprites, with alpha channels that you can then use. There are graphic engines. So Chiron has one, VizRT. There are big graphics engines that will play out the live graphics, and those things are literally built in Maya and then brought into it, and then all the data packages. When you're watching football graphics, specifically football on either side, but definitely in American football, you're seeing these VizRT systems are pretty popular. ABC, ESPN, I know, or at least for a long time, them and Fox all used VizRT. I don't know what they're using now, but for a long time they did. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He said, "If you could you see SPX-GC as part of the Office Hours 2.0 production pipeline as a supplement to Isadora?"
I definitely can. Yeah, we're definitely researching that pipeline. So we're going to be talking to Tuomo more about that. Next question.
And the last one currently in the queue says, "Could you animate a 3D graphic within a pure HTML5 framework, or would you be relegated to playing a pre-rendered file?"
Go ahead, Tuomo.
Depends on the situation. There are techniques that you can use 3D models as a live element within a web environment in your on-screen graphics, but it really depends what you are doing. And some of the browsers which are built into video switchers may not support all of those formats. One of them is WebGL. We have developed a sort of like a proof of concept template, which looked really dorky and old school because it was Chrome in a extruded text, but we managed to make it work. So it can be done, but I'm not sure if anybody wants to.
Yeah, and I would keep your eye on USDZ. There's a lot of pressure from a couple different directions that to make USDZ part of the web consortium, to be supported within the browser. And probably will be supported in Safari no matter what. But whether it's supported in other things will be the open question. Go ahead, Courtney.
I was wondering if you could render it to an animated GIF and then just include that GIF as part of a lower third.
You probably could. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Peter. Next question.
Yeah, we had another one come in late here from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. He says, follow up to question number 2, if I'm recording locally and streaming, I already know my resolution, frames per second, and so forth, so I can create my lower third in HTML, CSS with known resolutions. So if I'm a Zoom guest or client, I assume I let them do my lower third for me. Is that the smart way?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time grokking what you're trying to do. So I think it's probably an after hours discussion because I don't understand. Go ahead, Chris.
It may be, and I'm with you, Alex, on this, but it may be a matter of, instead of designing your animation with hard-coded numbers, that you deal with things as variables.
Which I really don't like. I will say that makes me very uncomfortable. Like it is where...
Technically, how is that different than a piece of hardware scaling an image down from Ultra HD to 1080?
Because I've just seen so many, like letting the browser make a decision about what it should do, to me seems like for broadcast graphics, it scares me. so anyway, like
we have found the limit of his comfort zone.
Yeah, I'm like, well, that one has that
guy
one
that'll
hit
do
pretty hard.
1080 video 15 years ago, but he won't divide by 2.
I think I don't like the web. I find it to be annoying. So letting browsers do stuff, it makes me a little like
Is HTML known for like hyphenation and word breaks and things like that? Or
it can do weird things. Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
I was only going to say, if you are in Zoom, you can actually look at your statistics and figure out what your resolution that you're moving at. So if you're trying to plan making a graphic to actually go into that resolution, you can actually figure it out when you're in the...
And I had prepared a couple videos or I grabbed a bunch of stuff off the broadcast. So I figured we'll spend the last 10 minutes. I thought we'd have a couple of questions, then we'd show the video, and then we'd have a bunch more discussion. And we just had lots of discussion, which is good. But I thought I'll show a couple of them just to what I look at when I'm looking at it. And people can raise their hand if they want to talk about it. I have to do a screen share. I tore something apart. I can't put this on the switcher.
There's a guy named Alex. Oh, come on. This is hard.
Don't let him have control.
If by chance I accidentally kick you from the room, it's been a great show.
It's top of the hour.
And we'll go just a little over because we started late on this hour. And we also stopped for a launch. So we'll go a little over here. Here's the, we will share that. So you see that little window here. So here is probably your most basic version of a lower third done by our local TV network. So, all stuff that, and before, we'll see a couple of them that are basic. And one of the things that we want to think about is making it basic also means it's very flexible. You can kind of put it where you need to. You can adjust it. You can add things. You can have it grow and small. So before, I used to slag when people did really basic ones, but I realized that there's a lot of times where it's nice because everything can kind of expand and contract the way it likes to, and it doesn't. It's just easier to manage, and it's nice, clean. It does what it needs to do. So I used to attack ones like this, but I've learned over time that they're actually pretty good. Now this one is much more designed. Now American football has football in the rest of the world also has a lot of budget. American football puts a lot of it into the graphics, and so you get to see what a lot of money will spend will get you. So I will say that a football graphics, regardless of what one, there's so much little information that they're giving you, related to this. I believe, so you'll look at like they're making little decisions about where the folds are, on those graphics here. Who the timeouts, there is so much information being just handed to you subtly, and it's worth checking out. You have the clock time, you have the overall quarter time, you have what's going on here. If we go a little bit further along, there'll be a flag and that'll swap out. You'll see that. We'll talk about sweepers another day. But you see these nice, they're making decisions about all of this. This is all very nicely designed with little drop shadows and put together here and really driven out, and this graphic is constantly changing to kind of keep your eye and being able to brand it, and so I would highly recommend, whether it's U.S. sports or global sports or other things, there's a lot of money being spent on those, and look at the kind of fonts that they're using. There's they're adding a little bit of, I think it's a little old. I think this is one part's a little old, the gradient that's going on. So they're doing a white gradient and then it's fading out just a little bit here, so that it has a little bit of dimensionality to it, but the little drop shadow creates what you feel like as a box in here. So by having this kind of gradients that are connected to each other, what you're seeing is they're creating dimensionality inside of this. So this is forward, this is back, this is forward, this is back, this is forward, this is back. And so all of those things are, they're designed to set that up. I'll run through these real quick and then we can make some comments, just because it's hard for me to see, and I apologize that I'm in screen share mode. It's just hard for me to see everybody. Here, what's interesting, they designed this one. Now, what was interesting, I don't think, if you go to the rest of the show on MSNBC, it looks completely different. So obviously they built a design to package. Now there's little things about these things that bother me, like this, to get back to space, these are too close to the edge. It just makes me crazy when I see that. So this text the problem is that you have this much room to the top and much less room to the bottom. And then this does not line up with that. And so those are things that I feel like when I see that, I feel like they rushed it. It was done for this thing, and all they need to do is pull these in a little bit to make that work. Bill, your mic's
Alex,
open.
is there something strange with the color background around the word reports there? It's kind of funky it's like it's two different variations or two hues of the same color.
Yeah, I don't see that on mine. Yeah, and
Yeah,
same thing here. Yeah,
it's like around reports, it's darker, but around the rest of the text, it's
I
slightly
think it's a drop
lighter.
shadow.
Oh, I think, maybe a drop shadow. It also, maybe they want MSNBC to be there. Now, another thing that kind of annoys me about text is when they stretch the text. So they've stretched that text to fit. Oh my gosh, do I hate that. Like I can almost not watch. I literally have gotten to the point where I can't watch CNN. Like I just can't watch it because every time they stretch the font, I just go, oh my gosh, and I turn it off. Like I just, like, as someone who's worked with type for a long time, that is an abomination, and I'd rather listen to NPR, listen to something than watch stretch text. So anyway, so the stretch text is what we would, in the print world would call an abomination. And they've taken the text and they haven't properly scaled it. They've just stretched it out, which is just not right. Now the other thing is this is kind of a look, but again, when there's not enough white space, as Roscoe was referring to here, it drives me a little nuts when it pushes right up against the edges of the boxes. But that's obviously a creative decision that they made. And then one thing that's interesting here, this is one part that they did well, is they kind of designed it around it. This gets into like paying attention to other graphics, so they fade that out. But this still, when they haven't thought about it, is when this is going over that edge by some uncomfortable amount, is a bad design. So they obviously, when they designed this one above it is probably a standard MSNBC super source. And so they know where that had to land so that it could go over the standard super source without it being weird. Now this one goes over it, but this whole line sets up the structure for this thing to sit on top of it. So it can go over that because of that, but you had to create something that felt like it was right up against it. It's not pixel for perfect. They're off by a pixel right there. But it's pretty close. There we go. CNN stretching the text. And there you can see a little bit of a drop shadow here because that's what's creating that. It feels like it's coming out, so it feels like it's rolling out by just creating this really, really subtle drop shadow right underneath this piece here. And then of course you'll see all the structure and things that they're working on in there, stretching the text. And that's, really not right. Here's proper text in this area. And you can see that they've kind of, again, this is a very clean look. We'll see this where, this is more of a, whatever Google calls it, that the clean design.
These are recent graphics, aren't they?
Yeah, these are this morning. I forgot about it.
This is a brand new story.
I came hot out of production yesterday, and then I woke up this morning going, "Oh no, I didn't have the graphics, so I pulled it all together." So yeah, this was just from this morning. And then here you have this is, by the way, all of this was grabbed very, very quickly on. This is the only reason that I subscribe to TV.YouTube. Like I don't watch enough TV to care. Like I don't care about this stuff. And so, for graphics research, it is a gold mine because you sit there and I literally just hit QuickTime screen record over top of my browser. And I just start going through all of the things. I don't even stop recording. I just go through them all. And then I just went into Final Cut, drop this all in, go, just start cutting real quickly, throw away all the stuff I didn't want. And I end up with all of this in minutes. And so when I'm doing graphics research, and it's because YouTube TV plays into a browser, makes it really, really easy to do this. Yeah, Chris?
I was going to say, if you're interested, you could put a chapter marker at the beginning of each clip and step through the chapters and make it easier when you're doing the demo. It's very simple. Yeah. Final Cut feature.
I could have. You're so smart. Anyway, so here's a much more clean look that the BBC uses. And so you can see that they're going down, definitely designing for the web, so to speak. I mean, they're really going right at the very bottom of the frame. I mean, they're leaving you a little bit of room, but not even 10%.
It also looks like they're saving for a 4.3 still. Is that possible?
Yeah. So you still see saving for 4.3. So when you see this gap here, it's that they're protecting for 4.3, for that. So that is you'll still see that in a lot of graphics where you don't go all the way to this outer edge. When in someone's pure web, you always use it up when you're pure web, when you're broadcast, you still protect. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd argue it's much more readable too because it's used uppercase, lowercase. You can just scan that real quick and see the shape of the words.
No, I agree. Here's a more lively ABCs. Now you'll also see that they're, these are little things that are used for branding, so you know where you're at. And like they're telling you that there's your ticker, everything sits on top of it. I try not to use red. I know that red is something that gets people to pay attention to it. It just doesn't compress well. so I'm always like, red doesn't compress well. I like cooler and more neutral colors for that. Stretching the text here, that's not right. Here's a much more complex look that you're seeing here from this. Now this one, it feels like they just completely ignored the super source. Like, this is just their set thing and they don't care about this part. And I think the people who watch it don't care about design, but it feels, I think this feels very old, like it just, they did a lot of like weird, like, bevels, these are like, this bevel up here. This is like, I made this a decade ago or 15 years ago and still think it's cool. But bevels are kind of old school at this point. So when I look at it, I go, this is a lot of information. so we're telling you about the bits and pieces. Here's the text here. Now, the thing to pay attention to when you look at lower thirds is look at all the stuff that's hiding underneath this. It's not just dark. And if it was just dark, it will look plain. They are putting design stuff back there and it provides interest and it is connected to the show. Like, it is a subtle thing. You have to remember that some of the most important things that you do when you're building design is it's the subconscious detail, because that's how people feel about those things. And so that is not just busy graphics or whatever. Typically it's got like logos and things and everything else, and you're absorbing it as a viewer. But anyway, but it's almost never just plain. And you want to pay attention to those things when you're looking at people's lower thirds and study them. And I do this all the time. Like I cut these things up, and I'm always paying attention to what's modern and what's not modern too. Like that's another thing that I pay attention to, because this flow is constantly changing over time. Go ahead. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, the blue behind the name key is derived from the blue graphic that's behind his head. There's the C and the A.
All of that stuff is tied together. The set, the lower thirds, there's a whole thought process there that's there. And then again, all that information, as we said, increases how long people are willing to watch things, because they're getting other information. Even if he gets boring for a little while, how do you keep people held into the system? So the extra data there has people like, they'll give you a little bit of time. It's not that they'll watch for that much longer, but they give you gaps. So there's a minute that isn't interesting. They're still like paying attention to the stuff down below, waiting for their team to come up on the thing or whatever. And they'll stay there a little longer to give you a chance to get out of that, trough, from that attention trough. Here's Fox News does the same stretching thing that CNN does, which is why, so it's a little annoying. They're not that much different, but in Fox News, some of their stuff, Fox and Friends is pretty boring. Some of their stuff is actually pretty high design. They spend a lot of money on it, but not this show. This is really, looks like they did it in PowerPoint. so anyway, this is really old school. The gradient that goes into here as the lower third with the little text on top of it. Like this is like a 20-year-old design, in my opinion. And then I thought this one's really nice. This is nice and clean. So you have, nice clean colors. There's, it's well designed. There's good white space or blue space in this case. It's a nice text. The movement's kind of nice. Look at how they have a little bit of something going on there. They're doing it in the little wipe there. I find this to be a very pleasing design. It's clean, but there's still a lot going on, and it creates a little bit of energy, in these little, I've grown to like these as sweepers as well as little transitions, these kind of angled lines these are like, things that are kind of providing the opens and closes to it anyway, for me, this is a very, very pleasing and light, and easy to look at, lower third, there. What's nice about it here is also, you can see how they integrated it. So when they go to the studio, they're now going to see how they fade that with the fade to the studio, they're fading out that section, so it's okay. Now we're going to keep on telling you that it's today, but we're taking out the information because we're now into this lower third here. And again, notice this is important. See those angles? The angles on the sweeper and the angles on the lower third are the same. Like they're 45 degree angle, but you'll see when two different designers work on it, oftentimes that angle will look different. And again, it's not something most viewers will notice, but they'll feel like it's off. It just has a feeling of being clean, not well designed. All thinking about how all those elements come together and see how that. So now they're going to come out of that and they fade that other section, back in, and you can see the movement. And I'm going to tell you that I'm doing it. See how that. I'm going to sweep that over and then tell you, that this is my second branding from today so there's a sweeper for the lower third in that lower right corner, which is just a really nice, nice effect. I think this one's very clean. It's just weird. So the thing that bothers me is that all of these have different white spaces, so I find this to be really hard to watch because I want them all to, follow one white space or at maximum two white spaces. But this has got one set of white space, and almost no white space, and I find that to be very, clunky. And then this is definitely a protecting. This is the ultimate protecting for old TVs. In that, because this is like the little graphic
guys in trailer parks watching a black and white Silverine.
Yeah, something like that. So this one I thought was interesting. This is like some little it feels low budget. You have this here, and this is look the alpha channel on this. Obviously, they put it together very quickly, and it's just not very cleanly done. They just need to get a better. You can see it's kind of soft and just kind of like, oh yeah, and this is just kind of like whatever. They should have cut along that white line right there, and then pulled up here and made it nice and sharp, as opposed to this kind of weird soft thing that they did. And then I think it goes into a graphic that looks went somewhere with a graphic that looked horrible. Stretching the text again. I'm ruining it for everybody now because you guys will all see that now. You'll see stretch text wherever you watch
Arial narrow, and they use it to squeeze more information into a smaller space.
It's wrong. It's wrong. So anyway, it's not because it's not CNN. You can watch them stretch it. Like they'll go to 2 lines, and then when they go to 1 line, they go and they just stretch it out. It is literally at that action that I just turn it off. Like I'm okay with it, and then I sometimes I'm okay with it if it's just stretched out. But as soon as I see them stretch the text like that, I'm like, I can't watch this anymore. So it's I know that I'm a little out there when it comes to that, but it cheapens the experience. That's all I'm going to say. And if people want to know, everything is about confidence with your client, with your viewers. And if they may not notice it, but they feel it. They feel that graphic is cheap. They feel that the thing is there. When you have really nice, well-positioned graphics that are following, solid design principles, you literally, whether you want to be more believable or not, you are more believable, and it feels better to watch it. And most viewers won't know why. So they won't know why. They just know that they feel less for something. And we have to be very careful as we start doing design. The one thing that we have to really start thinking about when we think about design and when we think about how we do shows is there is an enormous amount of work that you do that people don't notice. Like for instance, in a news, you see this all the time. The words that they use to refer to something, the camera angles that they use, the graphics that go under them, the way it's cut. All of those things affect the way the viewer feels, and they feel about that subject and they feel about that brand. And so it may seem like these tiny little details, but those things undermine how the viewer looks at, that organization or what they're doing. And so the graphics are not, that's why we're paying a lot of attention to them, is they're not just information. They are setting up the brand, whether that's a broadcast, and that's what we're thinking about. And we won't get it right when we start. We're experimenting with so many things. We won't get it right when we do Office 2.0. It'll look good, but it's not going to look perfect. But you're going to see us constantly working on it, like constantly drilling down into it, trying to make it feel really, really, really solid, and really high quality, around the high quality cameras and discussion that we've already created. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, so if you're doing a show package, it's always the graphics, but also the toolkit that you deliver along, right? So the team itself, like the editors, can then actually build on after you, right? And then when you're doing a network package, these things take months to do. And aside from a few hundred deliverables that you have to give, you also have to give a style guide. And that thing will be 100 to 200 pages where you describe every single way that you can use a logo and what color, and every single way that you cannot use their colors or the color combinations. And those are the things that you'll spend the most time on, trying to get that right, because you have to set it so after you're long gone, a smaller team can actually just pick up the ball and run with it and know exactly where they have to go.
And the style guides are key, because you'll get the style guide and you just want to, that should becomes your Bible as you're working on, like, what colors can I use? What fonts can I use? What can I, one of the things, by the way, that a lot of folks have started to move towards is building their own fonts. So going to a foundry and having them spend $5,000 or $10,000 on a font, and sometimes that's, or as much as $100,000 on a font. Once they have that, number one is it's their own look. Like, you can't easily reproduce their look because their font is just a little bit different and it's usually not that much different. A lot of them look surprisingly like Avenir, or surprisingly like Helvetica, or surprisingly like Garamond. Like there's certain ones that are surprisingly similar to it. They're almost always sans serif. So we were talking about that a little earlier, but sans serif for broadcast is, in my opinion, all you want to use. I don't, every once in a while you see someone use a serif font. You're just like, really? Anyway, but by building their own font, one of the things that's really interesting, they don't pay the licensing either. So they don't have to worry about all the legal ramifications, because technically, when you ask a client for a font and they just send it to you, they're not allowed to do that. Like that's against their licensing. So the of that, unless they own it, and they might have paid. Some of them have paid a big dollar amount that lets them do that. But so if you're working with a really large client, that might be the case. But most clients don't have that licensing for that. And so by buying the font and paying a foundry to do it, and a lot of those foundries, that's why they make money. They put up. You wonder, why do they put up all those free fonts or really inexpensive fonts or whatever? Sometimes they're making some money on it, but a lot of times they're showing what they can do, and then they get people to come build. They pay them to come build. You only need to do a font or two a year, as a foundry for and you can do. Oftentimes you can do pretty well if it's a big one. Anyway, those are things to think about. Hopefully that was a useful conversation. And I think that turned out better than I expected. I thought we were just going to go through the graphics and kind of break them all down, but it was a great conversation about process. Next week, we're going to do super sources. So we're going to talk about super sources and we're going to break those apart. And then the week after that, assuming there's one person that I'm trying to get to come on office hours. I told them Wednesdays would be a good day. If they come on, we're going to get out of their way. But other than that, next week will be super sources. The week after that'll be sweepers. And so we're just going to keep on kind of talking about those on Wednesdays for a little while because we're really thinking about it a lot right now. So anyway, thanks to everybody. Thanks to the producers. A lot of great questions, as usual, as expected. And thanks to the panelists for the great answers and being here and contributing back to everybody. Really makes a difference. So thank you so much.